In 2020, director Liz Garbus brought us the Netflix film Lost Girl, showcasing the true account of a mom's search for her missing daughter that led to the discovery of over a dozen young sex workers found unalived on the outskirts of several Long Island communities. Now, Garbus is back with Gone Girls, the Long Island Serial Killer. It's a documentary on the same topic, but this time, many more discoveries have come to light and bring the cases closer to justice. Young women who worked in the sex industry were disappearing from New York City and Long Island, and their families were desperate for answers. Then in 2010, female remains were found in the Gilgo Beach area of Long Island, leading to a string of additional discoveries at a virtual dumping ground steps away from New York's busiest beaches. Despite all of this, the case of the Long Island serial killer remained unsolved for 13 years, until July 2023, when a major break came after corruption was rooted out within the police responsible for the case. So this is a 3-episode docuseries, and for anybody that's not familiar with the case, the series examines what really kicks the investigation off to begin with, which is the dogged persistent pleading and petitioning by a mom whose daughter went missing. Now, Mary Gilbert's daughter, Shannon, disappeared in 2010, and because Shannon was a sex worker, the police weren't very interested in looking into the case. But after human remains were found in an area of Long Island, an investigation opened up, leading to the discovery of several more bodies and remains. Now, the doc takes an in-depth look at the policing and investigation, how the sheriff and DA were reluctant to act, and then even connects Shannon's disappearance and the eventual found remains to the same string of killings. In fact, we watch how the authorities pretty much obstructed their own case by not entertaining the idea that all of the killings could be linked. It seems like common sense, and merely a reasonable hypothesis. But at a bunch of shocking details, we learn how it wasn't merely a coincidence, but rather rampant corruption that played an integral part in the lack of investigating. Now, I normally think that most of these docuseries, they go on a little bit too long and could be cut down. But I'm thankful that this one took the time to deep dive into the law enforcement side, not just giving us some cursory look at sketchy behavior, but looking at some of the root relationships that began decades earlier and then affected the case in the present. The injustices that are uncovered are sickening and maddening, and it's amazing to see how new leadership affected the murdered sex workers' case in a positive way. What had been obstructed and kept very in-house amongst the good old boys now received the assistance and the knowledge of the FBI and all of their resources. And there's a point when we see how little time it takes the new investigators to put all the pieces together, connecting the killings, and then land on a suspect. It's heartbreaking to see how much time had been wasted while families of the missing women, or those that had remains found, had to wait in that just excruciating unknown. There's a lot of archival news footage that is used to establish the case and the investigation, and that's then supported by interviews with Long Island residents and family members of those who went missing. And these help to paint the picture of the devastation they experienced thanks to the procrastination and lack of concern by the initial investigating team. Even watching current interviews with law enforcement who were semi-involved or around during the initial investigations creates a level of disgust. Some simply because the accounts are just matter of fact and they lay out what was or wasn't done. Other times it's because there's a lack of remorse or even understanding of what those delays did to the family members. Now, this is an extremely gripping watch, especially because the documentary brings us right up to the present. We watch how detectives gathered evidence on a suspect, surveilling him, and making sure they had as much proof as possible, and then they make an arrest. And thankfully, the doc also then dives into the suspect's background, looking at what the authorities say and then balancing that against neighbor interviews and family statements. It's strange to see how quiet of a life the suspect lived, in contrast to the brutality and savagery of the murders that he's accused of. And don't get me wrong, the documentary isn't painting the suspect to be either innocent or guilty, but instead just giving us a well-rounded perspective of his life, actions, and background. Now, the movie that Garbus directed before this doc was based on a book by Robert Kolker, and he is one of the interviewees for the documentary. And his insight is key in helping to flesh out a lot of the background on the murders and what even kicked off the investigation to begin with. Mary Gilbert and her search for her daughter. Now, obviously, because the novel was published several years ago, it's not current up to the suspect, arrest, and pending trial. But thanks to the level of research that Kolker did for his book, those facts help to support what the current investigation suspects. Kolker almost becomes like a narrator in spots, just simply because he has all of this knowledge of the case. Then it works to add even more watchability to the series. Now, this is a wild ride of a docuseries, and not in some sensational or flashy way. I mean, this isn't Tiger King. But the emotional roller coaster that we're taken on thanks to the complexities of the investigation brought about by the corruption within law enforcement makes for some dramatic viewing. The case is heartbreaking, made visceral thanks to all of the interviews of family members of the missing and the murdered women. Their stories are tough to watch, especially as some have to experience fleeting glimpses of hope of justice, only to then have it ripped away by incompetent policing or lack of initiative by the popo. Garbus weaves together a compelling look by helping to do what law enforcement and even the media wouldn't. She humanizes the victims instead of villainizing them because of their profession. The storytelling is masterfully crafted to be intriguing without becoming exploitative and is current enough to take us up to where the case currently rests, waiting for trial. And while the series will take about 3 hours to digest, it's worth every minute thanks to intimate interviews, extensive archival footage, and storytelling that connects on a human level. There's no sex nudity, a lot of profanity, and while no violence is shown, we are given horrific descriptions of violence. Now, as a reminder, I don't give couch ratings to documentaries, but I highly recommend checking out Gone Girls, the Long Island serial killer on Netflix. I mean, this is certainly a docuseries to spend your time with. All right, are you familiar with this case? Did it unveil any new info for you? Let me know about it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.